Hello, everyone. Welcome to Eden Eye Tarot, where we illuminate your stars and your cards. My name is Micah. I'll be your astrologer and your tarot reader for today. We have a little bit of a different video today that I'll talk about in just a second. But before we get into all of that, if you would not mind liking, sharing, commenting on this video, it would help the channel grow. We will be talking today about the Astroweather/tarot weather. I kind of like tarot weather better, even though I'm having a really hard time pronouncing it. I like it better because everybody says astro weather. And so I really like tarot weather. Maybe that's my Aquarius stellium really showing itself. I'm like, we will be talking about the astrology of this week. As it relates to kind of just the general energy that will be going into this week. And, dependent on your own chart, you can plan for how each day will affect your actual chart in a little bit in advance if you're watching this early. But we'll also be talking about the pre-pulled cards that I have for each day of the week, as well as the cards that I pulled for the general energy of this week as well. So if you want to go ahead and get out your calendars, your snacks, wine, coffee, that would be right now would be a good time to do it. I know that I like to, have a little snack while I have my coffee. I usually do that in the morning, and have my, planner out to not only map out the astrology as it relates to me and just kind of the general energy of each day, but also write down each tarot card for each week of or each day of the week for myself. And so if that is something that you would like to do, just to kind of keep a good like a mental note or physical note for yourself to look at each day, that could be something that could be very beneficial. I find it beneficial, and so I'm sharing that with you. But if you wanted to do that, you could do that now. You can pause the video, but we're going to go ahead and get into this. So we have for the general energy of the week, we have the High Priestess card. We actually have two cards, but we're going to talk about the High Priestess card first. The High Priestess card is a card that really speaks about intuition, inner voice, divine intervention. Not so much as, divine intervention as, we're talking about the Hangman card. It's not quite the same thing, but it is talking about, listening to intuition, really communing with ancestors, higher self, spirit guides, things like that. But what I get most from the High Priestess for this week is that the High Priestess card is not a card that we get when we're talking about doing a lot of like action things. At the most, it's a card that's saying, okay, yes, you can do the action, but make sure that you have thoroughly reflected and thought on the action before you actually do it. We are all living in this world, this fast paced world. And so I completely understand if you can't go a whole week without making any sort of decision or making any sort of action. But the High Priestess is saying when you do those actions, make sure that you have fully reflected on them and their consequences. You thought through them. And you're also paying attention to what is instinct telling you. We do have quite a few aspects that have to do with Mars. Mars is a planet that has to do with our aggression, but it also has a lot to do with instinct. Instinct to me is a another way of saying intuition. They're two sides of the same coin, instinct and intuition. And so the High Priestess can really be a sign that instinct and intuition take precedence over quick action this week. We get that even more when we see the second card, which is the Hermit card. The Hermit card is about self awareness. It's a card that is also talking about if you are looking to understand something a bit on a deeper level, then, kind of pulling away from everyone else's opinions. Or like the white noise of everybody else's opinions is really helpful to be able to understand what is it that you want out of the situation. And sometimes that means that you have to walk that journey alone, finding that self awareness and really understanding yourself and your goals to be able to go forward in the way that you feel is most authentic to you. The Hermit card is also associated with Virgo. which is funny because we end this week on Moon in Virgo, and so we have the High Priestess card that is representative of the Moon, and then the Hermit card that's representative of Virgo. And so it can be a lot about, again, looking at the smaller details of things, not so much to where you are, being really nitpicky and, getting hung up on the small details and trying to make things perfect, but definitely thinking through things. Um, Virgo can be a great energy to work with when trying to kind of master a situation or master a new technique. It does have a lot of like ties to skill mastery because of its attention to detail. And so it finds what works and what doesn't. It's kind of like that trial and error kind of energy. But also, when we look at Virgo and the Hermit card, we can see teachers, healers, um, who comes in to really help and assist us. How are we being of service to other people as well can be another way that comes in. But Virgo is also an earth sign. And so it can talk about not only finances and, more materialistic things, as well as being a bit more conservative. And I don't mean conservative like on a political scale, but, conservative as like literally conservative, like conserving our energy. Especially this week, for the things that really matter. Where are we being very conscious of where we're putting our energy or where we're spending our energy? Who are we giving our energy to? Sorry, I just had like a little fruit fly. um, but yeah, we have the Hermit card really talking about that that energy of conserving and just being very conscious of where we're spending our energy as well. The Hermit card, because it's related to Virgo, can also be talking about our health and maybe what consequences stress or the lack of structure or the lack of scheduling, or having to reschedule things that might affect our body as well. And so having a good plan or taking time to strategize can be very helpful this week, I think, with the High Priestess. If you're having a hard time being able to do that, I think also the Hermit says that we can find a teacher that's willing to kind of help us along with those things as well, whether it be our higher selves or an actual physical person. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the astro weather. And as we go throughout the astro weather for each day, I will talk about the cards that I pulled for that day. Okay, so we have on Sunday, we're starting out with the moon in Gemini. Anytime the moon's in Gemini, we are looking at themes of communication, intellect, learning new things. I think mostly Sunday is just kind of like a very communicative day, a day where we're getting a lot of things done, a lot of multitasking is happening, especially as the moon is moving into a conjunction tomorrow, which will be Monday, with Jupiter, where we get this almost very optimistic, kind of like very light and playful view when we are talking about like emotions, and it can really help us to focus in on what needs to get done, especially as the moon in particular is ruled by, while it's in Gemini, is ruled by Mercury and Scorpio. And so while I think that it's a great time for study on Sunday and Monday, even, we do have some very intense communication going on, because we'll also see that during this week we have Mars opposing Pluto. It hasn't happened quite yet when we're in Sunday and Monday, but we do have Mars making a square to the Sun in Libra, and so there can be a lot of emotional kind of turmoil, and so there can be a lot of intense communication around, surrounded around, like maybe we feel like people are being a bit manipulative, or people are being a bit unfair when it comes to our relationships and the communication that is happening, or maybe even that somebody is being a bit too harsh and not very mindful of maybe how the other person is feeling from the communication that they have put out. I want to stress also that during this week, especially again Monday, Sunday, Monday, even Tuesday, we'll see Mars and Neptune in Pisces. Mars in Cancer and Neptune in Pisces make a trine. And so I think it's really important to be open and honest about how we're feeling about things. I think that really empowers us and takes us away from that feeling of almost being cowed by the dominance of other people into pushing us into exposing how we feel. It's important to be very tactful, and we'll get into that during the rest of this week in particular. But for Sunday, the card that I have in particular, or sorry, not in particular, the card that I have for Sunday is the Two of Wands. The Two of Wands is a card that's really looking at the potential of a new adventure. It's moving forward. It's saying, hey, I've already created this. I think Sunday is a great day for study and really focusing in on what needs to be learned and getting things done, getting things prepared, getting things organized. I think it's really nice this week that we have we have the moon starting and ending in Mercury ruled signs. We'll start with moon in Gemini, and then we'll end the week with moon in Virgo. And so it's the two sides of Mercury. And so there's a lot of movement happening throughout this week. But I think it's important to realize that a lot of what we're going towards is being a bit more reflective, being tactful, predicting almost the next steps of not just ourselves, but other people, and taking that into account when we're talking about our own actions instead of trying to sidestep and not deal with things and being a bit more passive aggressive like Mars and Cancer can do a lot of the times, but it's really lending itself to being a bit more open and honest. When we have Mars and Cancer, we do link back to the moon, which is ruled by Scorpio. And it's saying, no, I need to be direct, but I'm going to be tactful. I'm going to reflect on why maybe this is bothering me, or maybe what needs to be changed, what needs to be purged, so that I can have closure and move on to the next thing, which is why I think we're getting the Two of Wands for Sunday. For Monday, we have the moon Jupiter conjunction in Gemini. And so again, we can have like that very optimistic feeling of, I'm able to get things done. I have a lot of things to do on my to-do list. I have a lot of places to go, a lot of people to see, and I am confident that I can get them all done. And so it can be this, very social time. I do think that both Sunday and Monday can be, times where there's a lot of not just intense communication, but a lot of gossip happening while the sun is still in Libra. And that can have its negative consequences, of course, but I think it can also be very positive because it can expose a lot of things that maybe were not we were not privy to. And when we look at Monday in particular, when the moon moves into Cancer and makes that grand water trine with Saturn in Pisces and Mercury in Scorpio, what we can see is maybe some planning that happens, or some formulation of a plan rather than concepts of a plan. It can be a very or it's formulation of a plan to achieve our goals, since Saturn is going to be goals, but it's in the dreamy sign of Pisces, and so it's like, how do you make that real? Where are we escaping, or where are we, maybe trying to hide from the things that we need to deal with? Mercury and Scorpio, where do we need to be asking more questions where we're not, or maybe we're trying to hide from those questions or those answers to those questions, where I think, the moon in Gemini is looking for the answers to those questions. And so it's really, asking you not to hide from those things because maybe they don't feel good. It's really trying to cut through the bullshit that first half of the week. And so when the moon does enter into Cancer, I think, emotionally we're feeling very serious, but on the other end, I think we're seeing a heavy emphasis on focus and feeling like, optimistic yet serious about getting things done. And so it can be a very productive start of the week for sure, if we are putting our energy where it needs to be put, like we were talking about for the High Priestess and the Hermit card for the general energy of this week. Saturn is really bringing that home as well. So when we look at the tarot that we have for Tuesday in particular, we have, let me find it, the moon card. We have the moon card, which is all the feels. It is the Pisces card. And so a lot of it is, really focusing in on intuition, going with that, my own kind of insights for the moon card. Whenever I think of the moon card, I think of like kind of going through the forbidden forest and traveling back to try and find your way to the castle. So essentially trying to find your way home or trying to find your way to that achievement. But you are not really sure how to get there. You're kind of going on a hope and a prayer and divine intervention on how to get to point B from point A. It's a lot of trusting what you cannot see and trusting your intuition and relying on intuition. It can be a great time to be very creative and to just create in general with this grand water trine. It's a great time to be receptive, but it can just be a very heavy time with Mercury being in such an intense sign of Scorpio that can talk about not only how we're expressing ourselves but our thoughts. Um, Being in that trine to Saturn, which is already a bit heavy when it's in the sign of Pisces, it can be, feel very isolating. And then the moon being in Cancer is just all the feels. And so it can just be a very heavy day as far as emotions. And I think definitely it can be a great time for releasing those emotions and purging those emotions, purging the tears and all of, the things that maybe we're repressing to be able to kind of get those things out and bring closure to them in our own way internally, so that we're able to move on to what we are hoping for, or hoping to find. It's also a lot of trust in the universe. Trust in the process is what I get not only from the moon card for Monday, but also from this grand water trine and the moon moving from Gemini to Cancer on Monday as well. So moving on to Tuesday, we have the grand water trine, of course, still happening, but we also see the moon. Or sorry, not the moon, the sun moving into Scorpio, where we're taking a shift from focus on relationships to focus on closure. Think the Judgment card when you think of Scorpio, and so it's about closure, but it's also about bringing things up from the past or bringing things up that we are repressing to be able to kind of deal with them, bring closure to them, and then move forward when we go on to the energy of Sagittarius. We're not there in Sagittarius, season yet, but because the sun is coming into the same sign as Mercury in Scorpio, I do think that those conversations come up. Which is why, again, I say, talking to a professional, a psychotherapist is something that is more associated with Scorpio energy, or just talking to a trusted friend. And I think, conversations about who you can and cannot trust and who you need to maybe, keep at distance because maybe you don't feel that you can trust them or you don't feel like you can be honest and vulnerable in talking to them, is definitely something that will also come up like around this time on Tuesday as well. But we find a lot of, I think, when the sun and Mercury are that close together, there become these like eureka moments, or we get new ideas, new inspiration. Mercury becomes illuminated when it's in the same sign as the sun, especially when the sun gets closer to Mercury. We tend to find answers to the questions that we're seeking. Um, and so there can just be, yeah, again, like a lot of focus on those things and focus on our emotions and a lot of talking. But I think it's a great opportunity, even though this has a lot of focus on emotional conversations um, and emotional changes. I think that it can be a great time to be very tactful, especially when it comes to conflict, because Scorpio is a traditionally Mars ruled sign. It's a great way to strategize and plan and yeah, really plan out how we want to express the things that maybe we've been holding back, instead of just kind of like emotionally vomiting on others, because we'll see that even more um, as we move into what day am I on? As we move into Wednesday. For Tuesday, we have the Four of Swords. And so this is kind of like the calm before the storm, or this is the strategizing or the withdrawal to be able to reflect, to strategize that happens before we actually talk and before we actually speak and express those feelings and let those feelings out to be able to be put out on the table, and then dealt with later. It can also be a time where, of course, we have Cancer and Pisces energy happening. And so not only are we strategizing with Mercury and Scorpio, but we're also getting rest. Maybe that is much needed to be able to kind of go into battle, so to speak. It is a time where we're spending more time alone and being a bit more reflective than, you know, being a bit more reactive or doing a lot of action. It's a time just to kind of come into ourselves and reflect on what it is we want to say, to be able to strategize on those things as well, but also, really look within. So much of Scorpio energy, especially Mercury in Scorpio, is going to be about looking within and really looking deeper into the psyche and asking ourselves those questions and challenging ourselves to be able to challenge thoughts and thought processes that just we've outgrown, like we've seen in the Two of Wands, but we'll also see later in this week as well. Yeah, and really taking time to think about those things and purge those things. And, usually we do that in private, which is the Four of Swords. And I think before we are able to take things more on an external level, we have to do the internal work first. And so I think that's really why we're getting the Four of Swords for Tuesday. So moving on to Wednesday, we'll have not only the moon and Mars coming together in Cancer, which can create a bit of spice when we're talking about our emotions. We're feeling a bit feisty, but we can also just feel very focused on or like changing plans can happen. The moon is change, Mars is like what action we're taking, especially when it's in Cancer. It's just very dynamic energy. It's a pivot. And so the change in action can be criticized, I think, when we're talking about like authority figures, because we'll have not only the moon and Mars coming together in a conjunction, but both of those planets will be opposing Pluto. Whenever we have Pluto in the mix, we can see that maybe those plans are being changed, or plans are being changed based on our energy levels or our emotional like kind of state. Pluto is going to be extremes. And so things can feel a bit bipolar, whether we ourselves are feeling a bit emotionally extreme, or authority figures are feeling that way. So I think like one way, we can look at it is that on one end, we can be feeling very focused on our goals, Capricorn, and we have all of the energy to be very focused, to really like, clue in, to be able to get things done and to take that action. And we do it very boldly. And, we can be a bit domineering by wanting to achieve those goals, because anytime we have any kind of opposition, you have to remember that it's a relational thing. And so in your pursuit to get things done or to change plans, it can come off a bit strong to other people, and you can find yourself in a bit of a conflict with other people because they're like, what are you doing? And so there can be some conflict there, or it can be on the other end, things feel just very heavy and you feel like people are, maybe taking advantage, which is definitely something I can see with that Cancer energy coming in. You're feeling like people are being a bit manipulative or just being a bit domineering, overwhelming. And it's just a bit too much. And that can be due to depression, or it can cause depression as well. And so I just want to, really encourage everyone to really focus in on not only that opposition that's happening on Wednesday, but also the moon, Neptune not sextile, trine that's happening between the moon and Cancer as well, and the moon and Mars in Cancer, as well as the trine that's happening with those two planets to Neptune in Pisces. It's a great time to express, like we were talking about earlier in the video, to express those emotions in a very tactful way. Neptune can be a lot about dissolving and what is unseen, but it can be also a great planet that you can work with to let things go, to let them kind of wash away like waves that come ashore from the ocean. um, Airing things out is something that I get the most, especially since the sun is in Scorpio. We have for Wednesday, we have the Queen of Cups. So all the feels. We have that grand water trine already kind of building, but I think more so than anything, I think with that opposition, it can be also feel like, there's a lot of pressure on you to take care of other people. And I think a great time to draw tactful boundaries, especially emotional boundaries, because you're feeling very sensitive between Tuesday and Wednesday. And just very clued into maybe the motives of other people, or just how other people make you feel, can just be a lot and very just overwhelming, and it can cause a lot of emotional upset and conflict in its result. But the Queen of Cups is a nurturer. She is the mother. And so I think, especially with a lot of these conflicts happening with Cancer energy this week, we're seeing that a lot of the pressure is coming from women in our lives, as well as maybe women authority figures, mothers, women bosses, all of those things. And so I think with the Queen of Cups, one, it is a nurturer, but it can, I think, with all these aspects happening, it's like, where am I over nurturing people and not taking care of myself enough? It's a great card to just kind of remember to clue into your intuition, not just your instinct. And that is that Moon Mars conjunction in Cancer. Um, Being creative is something that I think we can also take from the trine between Neptune and the Moon and Mars as well. That can be a great way to kind of work out some of the frustration, especially since a lot of this week with that opposition to Pluto and Mars is kind of like kick the dog syndrome. There's a lot of things that are maybe happening for people in the background that you don't know about or that are unseen, Neptune and Pisces, that they're taking out on you. Displaced aggression can be happening. And so while I do think the Queen of Cups is saying, being empathetic and understanding that it maybe has nothing to do with you is important, it's also important to let people know this is what you're not going to do. This is what we can do. And this is what I am willing to do. But nothing more, nothing less, because I have to take care of me as well. I have to fill my own cup before I fill your cup. And so that's what I'm getting for the Queen of Cups for Wednesday. For Thursday, we have the moon coming into Leo, um, which is focusing on passion and heart space. Right away, we see the moon and the sun and Scorpio coming into a square. And so when we see these two luminaries squaring off, it's a lot again about our not only our energy levels, so we can be feeling a bit low on energy and a bit sluggish, but it can be a lot of internal conflict. In particular, our emotions are at odds with our actions or our vitality. And so it can be feel like a day that we're not being like super authentic to ourselves, and there can be a little bit of confusion. Scorpio is a lot about purging. It's about transformation. It's about crisis. But I think, it's ultimately about rebirth, especially when we're looking at this aspect in particular. It can be like a rebirth of something or bringing light to something, since the moon in Leo is ruled by the sun in Scorpio at this point. And so, and that's why I do say authenticity is key here. Pay attention to what the heart says. What are you most passionate about? And that's where you will find relief in this aspect between the sun and the moon. It'll be over quickly, but just remember that you can also see, yourself being at odds with other people. Again, there can be a lot of squares, or a lot of, conflict, or, just kind of rubbing you the wrong way on this day in particular. But because the sun and the moon are have reception, and Scorpio seems to be the shining light in the situation. We also have a corresponding card that kind of mirrors this energy as well, which is the Eight of Cups for Thursday, leaving something comfortable behind for something new because we've outgrown it. It's time to go on to the next thing. The Eight of Cups is that. It is going. It's so much. The Eight of Cups has a lot of callbacks to the Moon card. It is trusting the process, not being able to see what's coming next, but knowing that what you're leaving behind is much better than um, is leaving what knowing that what you're leaving behind and what you're going towards is much better than what you're leaving behind. Jesus Christ. And that can cause a little bit of anxiety. It can cause some worry because you don't know what comes next. But um, you'll see later in this week, continuing on, but I think we've been building up to it, is risk taking pays off, or being willing to let go of things pays off because it clears the way for something new. And so the Eight of Cups is for Thursday. And like we were talking about, Friday, we see the moon still being in Leo, but we see a square between the moon and Mercury. So there's a lot of again, there can be a lot of self doubt, especially when we're talking about like the words that we have like in our own mind, but it can also be people being a bit more critical of us and the work that we're, kind of putting forward as well. Um, or not the work that we're putting forward. I say work that we're putting forward because Mercury is at an 18, and so it's a Virgo degree, and so it's like the service that we're putting forward, or like what we're saying, what we're working towards. And so it can be that, like we're being a bit critical either of ourselves or other people are being a bit more critical of us. Either way, it comes back to feelings of self-doubt, or the mind is at odds with the emotions. And so it can be also a day where there's just a lot of anxiety around what can and cannot be done, but mostly I think around self-doubt, because the moon in Leo is, very confident. It's very creative and passionate. And Mercury in Scorpio is kind of like that, but what if kind of thing. It's, digging up on those fears and those thoughts of fear and crisis that we come up, that, we need to bring light to be able to deal with. We also, of course, have the Mars Pluto opposition coming into more of a perfection as well, and so other people can be exacerbating these things when it comes to like power struggles, and it can feel like you're a bit trapped when we have these two really hard really hard aspects coming in with the moon and Mercury, and then Mars and Pluto. There's a lot of power struggles, both internally and externally. It can be a hard time, and it's, it can feel like a lot of pressure. What I do think the saving grace is if you're willing to take the risk. Um, Mars in Cancer is making a really nice sextile to Uranus and Taurus. And so it's, again, really asking, how are you nurturing? What new ways can you nurture yourself? How can you break out of these power struggles? I think that might be the motivator of a lot of the power struggles, ironically, that you're facing, is like, I want to do something new. I want to break out of something new. I want to dissolve a partnership. I want to dissolve the state of, foundation that I've built up, and I want to go on to something new. If you have the courage to do that and break through like that, despite the naysayers, even if the naysayers are yourself or other people, I think you'll find the most peace, even if it is scary. We do have for this is Friday. Or sorry, this is going to be, yep, this is Friday. Um, we have for Friday, we have the Six of Wands. The Six of Wands is the Jupiter in Leo card. When we're looking at this card in particular, it's going to be about victory, but it can also be about celebration. But the focus is usually on recognition from other people. And I argue that whenever I see this card come up, it's mostly about our own recognitions of ourselves. Remember that people praise you for what you do in private. And the Six of Wands, I think, really embodies that. When we're looking at the Six of Wands, it's so much about, the self love that you find in yourself, which we kind of already see with the general energy of the Hermit card, of that self awareness. Um, really coming in, it says that, are you okay with what is happening? Is this something, the actions that you're taking, are they authentic to you? How do you feel? Because how you feel about yourself and what you're doing comes through as the confidence and that authenticity that we see with the moon in Leo comes through as authenticity. And it comes through as confidence as well. And I even see that with the moon in Cancer, or the Mars in Cancer. It's, again, like working towards persistent work towards what is security, what is home. It can also be a time where you're just changing a lot of things around in the house, or like that you're just doing a lot as far as moving, and you're, having to rework a lot of things, and it's a high pressure time. That could also be what's happening. But the Six of Wands is so much about, like, what do you think? Not do what other people think, because the thing is that as long as you recognize yourself, other people will recognize you later. Again, what is done in private is praised in public. Remember that. Six of Wands. Um, let's see. Finally, we have the moon on Saturday. It'll move out of Leo and into Virgo, where we're seeing a bit more of, we've kind of, been feeling a little anxious. Anytime the moon is in Virgo, it's, a little anxious. It's just the nature of Virgo, but we can see more of a focus on getting organized, making the list, focusing in on our health as well. We do see briefly, while the moon is still in Leo, we see a square to Uranus, which is like that kind of anxiety feeling, or that feeling of newness. If you did take risk, I could see this being exacerbated as well. It's kind of like what comes next kind of thing. I feel like I'm a bit off kilter. Again, focus on authenticity. And if you are not working in that more authentic heart space, then this can be a great time to rectify that, because that'll probably be where the anxiety is coming from. Um, Change is squared with change. The moon is change, but so is Uranus. It can be about rebellion. And so it can be about literally a time to rebel. And that can cause its own conflict with others, especially friend groups. Or it can be in, be not just a rebellion in like, emotions, and just kind of being like emotionally a bit sporadic, or having emotional, like these very dramatic emotional outbursts, but it can be like changing how you're investing money, time, energy as well. See Venus and Saturn coming into a square at the end of the week. Venus in Sagittarius is big gestures, generosity on a massive level. You have Venus in a Jupiter ruled sign. And so it's going to be, an expansion on open mindedness, getting really curious. I do like that with Mercury being in Scorpio. It's not only the investigative energy, but you kind of have the support system, or the relationships that also open up your mind and your worldview as well, and expand your horizons in that way. And it opens up a lot of connectivity opportunities and networking opportunities from people of different cultures and different backgrounds as well. But my biggest thing is Venus also rules money. And so it can be, overspending or overindulging, especially when we're talking about like spirits and alcohol and substances and things like that, which Saturn in Pisces is going to put a little bit of a restriction on, or at least a very much like kind of reality checking you and saying like, hey, are you overindulging in this? Are you escaping too much in this? Are you escaping too much in partying? Are you escaping too much in alcohol? Are you like, what is real and what isn't? Even if we're talking about ideas, especially if we're talking about money, it's saying like, where are we overspending at? Where can we dial it back a little bit? Because Venus in Sagittarius is also very optimistic as well. And so it's like, while you have all these optimistic ideas, are they realistic? Having Venus in Sagittarius also can be, there's an abundance of opportunities of relationships, but which ones are really going to be beneficial for Jupiter like things? Since we have Saturn in Pisces, which is another traditionally Jupiter ruled sign, in Venus in Jupiter, or in Venus in Sagittarius, which is also a Jupiter ruled sign. And so it's like, you have these great opportunities for connectivity, but which ones are actually worth keeping and worth committing to, which is also a Jupiter Saturn thing. And so just keep that in mind. The card that we have for Saturday is the Nine of Cups, which is a really nice way to end off this week, especially since it is looking at the smaller details of things and not just looking at the big picture. The Nine of Cups is kind of like that breakthrough. It's that breath of fresh air that we get when we see the Nine of Cups is wish fulfillment. It is a card that can be associated with going out, getting, um, getting a little tipsy, but being social, just getting out with each other, with another person, or, getting out with friends, and, partying can also be a connotation of this card. But I think it's mostly about wish fulfillment or breakthroughs as well, manifesting the things that you have been looking for. And so it's a nice way to, end off the week. And so just keep that in mind for the Nine of Cups. That is what we are looking at for Saturday. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know down in the comments if you like astro weather or tarot weather better for these videos. I will probably call this tarot weather. But let me know in the comments which one you like best. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.